This is Aaron and Linda with Traveling Flamingo, and we got a bunch of news for you today. It's been a pretty tumultuous couple of weeks when it came to the cruise industry, from NCL talking about what they're going to do when they open up their ships, to then announcing that they've gone ahead and canceled all of their cruises until October. And now the industry that represents the cruise lines has announced they're voluntarily canceling all ships until mid-September. Got all of that coming right up.
So just a little bit about what the Cruise Line International Association is, the CLIA. It is the largest association that represents over 50 cruise lines worldwide. It encompasses 95% of the global cruising industry, so that's huge. And they were established in 1975, and what they do is they support protocol and policies to ensure safe, secure, and sustainable cruising. So for North America, that is going to include your major cruise line brands, Disney, Princess, NCL, and more. Like it just really encompasses a lot there. So this announcement really puts a halt to cruising in North America.
Pretty well stops it for the next little while. So what the CLIA said in their June 19th announcement is that all CLIA members will be extending their voluntary suspension from US ports until September 15th. So to be clear, that's all US ports. This doesn't include other countries, Canada, Mexico, other parts of the world. But those sailings from US ports are all going to be scrubbed until September 15th. So this affects the same ships that were under the no sail order before. So it's not about the ship necessarily, it's about the port and whether or not you can access those ports, and passenger cruise ships that carry over 250 people. So that's, in general, the scope of what we're talking about is canceled. However, it's a pretty large scope.
Mm-hmm. And while we were researching this, because actually we were supposed to have a cruise on Disney in August, and that one hadn't been canceled yet, so when we got the email last night, we're like, research.
And we had just finished the last video that is going live this morning, and so we've made this addendum to, but it's important. We're going to get into what the announcement says, and I think it broaches a topic that's really important about COVID in general, and I think it sort of warrants its own video. So that's why we decided to make a sort of an addendum to the video we had already made.
And this quote probably stood out to me the most. I know as soon as we're going through and I read it, I was like, Aaron, listen to this. So, we're going to talk about this, share it with you guys, but this is the quote that really stood out to me. So they said, due to the ongoing situation within the U.S. related to COVID-19, CLIA member cruise lines have decided to voluntarily extend the period of suspended passenger operations. The current no-sail order issued by the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, will expire on 24th of July. And although we had hoped that the cruise activity could resume as soon as possible after that date, it is increasingly clear that more time will be needed to resolve barriers to resumption in the United States. Wow, I think that's totally calling out the U.S.
I think it's definitely talking about some of the problems they're facing, but they weren't very specific as to what problem. Right?
True.
I think they kind of made an assumption that the cases are kind of increasing in the U.S. in certain areas, and that's why they're deciding to cancel it, but they don't explicitly state that.
Well, they do say it is because of the COVID situation in the U.S. And so I would interpret that as how the COVID situation is going, how the U.S. government is handling the situation. They're like, nope, we're out till September.
And we do have some very interesting information just on sort of what the COVID situation does look like currently in the United States, and comparing that to Canada and Mexico as other parts of North and South America.
Well, and for Canada, our ports, our government has already said, is closed until October. So they don't even need to lump Canada into that, because our government has already said, they've actually said, we're not touching the cruise industry. So there you go.
So it is interesting when you look at what's going on with COVID right now in the United States. And all of this data is going to be in the sources below. We're not necessarily going to give opinions on what's going on in the US. Firstly, we're Canadian. It's, one of those not really our country thing. But, the stats are the stats. And so when you look at the cruise line industry, for instance, they're probably looking, the three most popular cruise ports in the United States is Miami, Cape Canaveral, and Port Everglades. And those are in Florida. And Florida is currently seeing a fairly large spike in cases. The US in general is seeing a bit of a spike, but there are certain states, obviously, that have a higher spike than others. So when you look at it, in June 17th, there was 2,610 new cases of COVID in Florida. And a week before that, there was only 1,371. And that's the general trend. We're going to have some graphs up on the screen here that you're probably looking at. These are all from either Google, which has, we looked at two different sources. We looked at sources from the CDC numbers as well as the European Health Agency's numbers, both basically the same. So these should probably be the CDC numbers. So beyond that, if you look at the other popular ports, the 11th most popular port is in Galveston, Texas. And again, Texas is having a bit of a resurgence as well. That said, the 16th most popular is in New York and New Jersey, and they're actually not. So you can see how, maybe you could open some places, but you don't want to continue this spread because overall, you saw what happened last time when there was COVID cases on a cruise ship and how that just damaged the industry for months, right? They're obviously still not recovered from it. So you can see why they may not want to take the risk right now to sail, have the possibility of another pandemic ship, and then wind up with, a year or two that they're going to have to stop sailing for because of that mistake, right?
I think also it will provide some consistency. If you agree or don't agree, me saying they're calling out the US, agree or don't agree, we're still in a world where COVID is happening and each government, each area is dealing with it differently. And I think that being that it isn't, we don't have a cure, we don't have even treatment, we don't really know that instead of having this cruise line saying, oh, I'm canceled till July 30th, this cruise line saying I'm canceled till September, whatever. No, we're all not cruising until middle of September. So we're not having these pop-up extended cancellation announcements. I think it also provides that blanket. Nobody's going till the end of September, reestablish for that.
And I think the cruise line industry sort of had to come together to make this decision only because you really don't want one person to go out early and then cause problems and then, sort of shut it down for everybody. So you get a lot of this in some of these industries, like Coke and Pepsi, for instance. They're probably going to want their industry group to actually make decisions on things that affect both of them so that one of them doesn't go too quickly and then,
Which is so interesting because if you check out our previous video, the CEO of Carnival, Arnold Donald, had done an interview and he was vague on a couple of these things. He's going, well, we don't have a date. He probably already knew that this was coming out. So he's saying we don't have a date, but we know that we need more social gathering to be allowed. We need to know, so check out that video if you're interested in more about what that interview with Donald. It was really interesting, his highlights that he'd given, but definitely the industry had to come together, having all this mismatch information and even NCL, we're going to be cruising out of Seattle. I don't know how you're going to do that. So those are canceled now.
Yeah. So, in general, the COVID situation, I think with the US specifically, I think Canada's obviously going to be canceling cruise ships for the foreseeable. I think they'd go to a year if they could at this point. They're very sort of aggressive in how much they want to cancel. But, until the situation starts coming back under control anywhere, right? It's not just the US. I'm sure if there's a spike up in Canada, they would do the same thing. When you look at it in the US, there's 6,878 cases right now per million people. So if you adjust for population, obviously the United States, 300 plus million people, Canada's 330 million people. It's a bit of a different gap there. But if you adjust for that 1 million people only, the US is at 6,878 cases per million people. And Canada's at, let's say, 2,649 cases per million people, which is less than half. And then you look at places like Mexico where it's 1,347 cases. So that per million people is very different. Mm-hmm. And you can kind of see how there's so much more of an increase right now with the United States and how they probably had to drive some sort of action like this. And hopefully for Americans and Canadians, because most of us cruise from America, hopefully they'll have some time to figure some of this stuff out in Europe and other parts of the world, and they can bring those lessons here, and it'll be safer overall in the end.
Mm-hmm. And I do think looking at the NCL's plan they came out with, there were some really good strategies in that. Mm-hmm. And it's going to give cruise lines an opportunity to implement these strategies as well. And I think one of the reasons when you're looking at this debate between, especially everywhere, when you're looking at this debate about what to do with COVID and what to do with jobs and unemployment and economy, it's all very much linked. And we see that with the cruise industry as well. So in 2018, the CLIA gave out some stats about 2018. And in 2018, they provided more than 421,000 jobs in the US alone. That's huge. So you understand the want to push it and get it going again. I mean, when you hear stories and the stress, and this is affecting people, that argument, well, I'm losing my business, I don't have money for food, I can't pay my rent, is the risk for COVID, that discussion is happening. And so the cruise line industry, 421,000 jobs in the US in 2018. And then they also have a stat here for each day of the cruise suspension operations in the US. It results in a total loss of approximately $110 million in economic activity and up to 800 American jobs. That's in a day. That is huge. So it is that discussion between, well, we're canceling longer. I mean, this is the cruise industry. I mean, this is the cruise season really done. Your schools, whatever that's going to look like, are going to be back in September. So to cut this and say, we're not doing it to September, or at least for now, we're not going till September, is we want safety to be done. We understand the jobs and the economic impact. It's a big decision to make.
Yeah, and you can say, well, these numbers came from the cruise line industry themselves, but even if you half it, or even if you half it and say it's $550 million and 400 American jobs, it's still quite a number of American jobs.
200,000 American
200,000 American jobs, right? And
400. Yeah, you're right.
Right, and so on the flip side of that too, a lot of the offices for these cruise lines are actually in Miami and in the U.S. So a lot of these jobs are actually at their headquarters. So I could see that number being fairly realistic.
Yeah, I think it's that argument is continuing between the risk of COVID, the economic factors. When we're looking at schools, the mental health there's a whole lot of factors that are having to be taken into consideration. So I give the CLIA credit for coming out and saying and having that discussion with all the major cruise companies and saying, we can't be doing this mishmash. Middle of September.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting with this pause now to September. We know that Royal Caribbean and Carnival were raising a lot of money to get over the time that they would need. Hopefully they took that into account on the $500 million I think that they raised. Hopefully they're pushing to weather the storm, and hopefully we all reopen soon, so that those even just the jobs of people delivering trucks to cruise ships in Florida to restock them, and the companies that provide that food and so forth. It's such a large industry, and hopefully things get back to normal soon.
And we know it's disappointing for people. I mean, that's our cruise season done for us. But hopefully we're looking forward to next year and starting to look at rebooking, and definitely that risk in people's health and people's safety is number one.
And one other thing, we did make a video about the refund policies for a lot of these cruise lines. Most of that stayed the same. If you are looking for a refund because you're affected by one of these things, check out that video. It'll tell you what your refunds are and what your options are. If there's anything that is new, we will add it to the comments of the old video and create a new one.
So thank you very much for taking the time to watch our video. Please let us know in the comments below. We've had some great discussions with people around what the cruising industry should be doing around COVID and everything. So please do let us know. We'd like to have that discussion with you. Please stay safe. Thanks for watching, and happy travels.